edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the need for an all-India environment service. Joining me on the program are two stalwart guests who are experts in their own right and have contributed immensely to this nation and to their respective fields as well. It's a pleasure to welcome on the program Mr. N.C. Saxena, former chairman, erstwhile Planning Commission, and Professor C.K. Varshney, former Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, JNU. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Mr. Saxena, let me start the program with you. I mean, this particular bit of news is once again in the spotlight because it has come up before the court. But this is not new. It has been mulled for a while now. It has also gone to a parliamentary standing committee. And yet here we are today. We do not have an All India Environment Service. What is the need for it? And what is the history of this issue?
Well, as you know, India is not doing very well on environmental issues, whether it is air pollution or soil erosion or water table going down, etc., etc., climate change, global warming, gas emission, etc. All this to be controlled by a large number of departments. Now, I'm all for greater focus on these issues, but creating an all-India environmental service is not the answer. First of all, you know, people have analyzed it in the past also. Mr. Subramaniam wrote, there was a committee headed by him. And, well, there's a problem, so this is a good solution that you can suggest an All India service like the IAS or IPS. But let's understand in government, there are two kinds of functions, line function and staff function. Line function is when, as a police officer, you have a DYSP, you have a station office, you have a police station, and you have certain work to be done. Staff function is of advice, of putting pressure on the other departments. Now, because environment is a subject which is controlled by a large number of departments, power department, transport, agriculture, minor irrigation, and so on and so forth. So therefore, this particular service will be totally useless. What you need to do is create an authority, a very powerful authority at the state level, and man it with good experts. It should generate knowledge. It should put pressure on these departments and achieve results, publicize it in the papers, which district is doing well, which is not doing well, where we have failed, where we have achieved results. Otherwise, creating a department, creating a service, you know, people will join and they'll become government servants, class one government servants. They will not acquire any knowledge, their domain knowledge will rust, etc., etc. I'm not in favor of another service because there is nothing to be done in the field by this particular officer.
Points duly noted, Mr. Saxena. Let me take the points that you're making forward with Professor Varshney. Professor Varshney, what are your thoughts on a service like this? I want to take this particular aspect forward with you as well. You know, Mr. Saxena raised this point of a powerful authority that is required. It looks like that is what is lacking at the moment.
I think many things are lacking at the moment. And let me just give you that it is not a new suggestion, and nor it is going to be a new precedent. Because, for example, when India got liberated, there was no All India Economic Service. There was no statistical service or pool, whatever you may call it. They were created because there was a felt need. And you remember that to begin with, if you go to the history of this, it was in 1952 or even little earlier that the need was felt by the Prime Minister or the chairman of the Planning Commission, that the issues are far more technical and complex rather than being administrative in the first place. So I think the administration is entirely a different ballgame than to handle a technical issue which is multi-sectoral and which has got 360 influence on every facet of our life, which is increasingly becoming evident in the current scenario, where lack of understanding of the environment and its nuances have created the policy, I should say, mismatch. At the same time, the policies are being revised so often because that we have not been able to capture the essence of the environment and the holistic nature of its impact and its consequences in a very significant way. Oftentimes, environment is mixed with some kind of a sectoral activity. And it is this which is very, very deficient. I fully agree with the Senaji that the authority is weak, implementation is weak. And that is a reason that the environment is progressively deteriorating. And I think all of us are witness and we cannot deny this. Now, under this circumstance, at the international level also, our commitment keeps on increasing. If you see at the Glasgow level what we have committed, if you see that earlier what we have said, that we will really cut down 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission in the Glasgow, that is COP26. In COP21, we have said that we will create additional sequestration capacity of 2.5 to 3 billion tons. And I think that is not possible by simply administrative. It's not administrative affair. And I can give you one example. KEMPA is one such administrative affair, reforestation program, which was started long back, and the trees should have been matured by now, and we should have seen the thick forest, but they are not there. So I think these are very complex issues, and for that we require expertise to take the decision, make policy, advise government, and so on and so forth. It is whenever we start, I tell you one very simple thing. When we started School of Environment Science, there was a big issue. What kind of subject is this? It has chemistry, it has physics, it has everything, what it is. I think each subject has its own merit and has sound footing, but this provides an overview that how they interact, and after interacting, what kind of impact and what kind of consequences and activities are really, which are unforeseen, which generate anew, are created. So I think these are the kind of things which only a person who has got a grounding in environment can take. We need now people who have knowledge of environment at corporation level, at quasi-government level, at regional level, at state level. So I think that we require authority, as has been very rightly put forth, and I fully support it. But at the same time, to manage this authority and to really carry on the task of this authority, we require an expert body of people, which are not replacing the administration, but which are really providing the technical and I should say evidence-based service for the administration to become more sharp, effective, and have some kind of impact to improve the lives of the people, which are rapidly sliding down and we are suffering.
Absolutely. Points very well taken as well. At the end of the day, this is an issue that affects us all and it has a direct bearing on all our lives. So why not have an expert body, something like the Environment Service, along with an authority to try and put our best foot forward. So Mr. Saxena, coming back to you now. So it seems like the order of the day, we're talking about an All India Judicial Service, we're talking about an Environment Service, we're talking about all these services. Is that what is really required for this country so that we improve and progress in the right way possible? Or is there an alternate?
Well, in fact, as I said, there's a difference between central services and all India services. Indian Economic Service, Indian Statistical Service, these are central services controlled directly only by Government of India. States have no impact, no sort of control over them. Whereas IPS, IAS, and Indian Forest Service, these are the only 3 All India services where control is dual. Now, as we all know, in environment, it is the states who are failing. And therefore, it is at the state level, we need to create some kind of an organization or authority which can really put pressure on these departments which are failing in their duty, whether it is power or transport or agriculture, etc. Creating, if we have a central service like Indian Environment Service, just as we have Indian Economic Service, Indian Statistical Service, all that they can do is collect information or writing a good report. But that will not be, they will not have any influence on the state government, because they are central, this is central service, the states will not listen to them. And they would end up as being just advisors to some authorities. And therefore, what I'm saying is that you have to look at the state level and how to strengthen the state authority. And this state authority should be chaired by maybe the chief secretary, and should have people with domain knowledge, people who can write well, people who can put environment in the textbooks, the school textbooks, so that the awareness about this increases. But to have a department which will be also working at the sub-district level, at the block level, that is just as we have in the IS, we have collectors, deputy collectors, BDOs, tehsildars. This kind of organization is not needed in environment. You require experts, you require people who can put pressure. And my own experience is that once people join government for the next 35 years, their desire to learn and the desire to improve their knowledge rather goes down. And therefore, I'll be much happier if the authority is created with experts who are taking on deputation for some years. Well, they can continue if they are doing very well. But creating an all India service, etc., which will have control, they will never be able to deliver, because they will have no authority and no control over the departments which are failing in their duty.
All right. Since we are here then, Professor Varshney, let's talk about the possibility of having an All India Environment Service. What can the role and scope of this service be, and what are the officers expected to do? Can we take a leaf out of the book or a page of from the Indian Forest Service, or is it going to be completely different?
Now you see that it is going to be, to my mind, very different, in the sense that it has to take. Now, first of all, I would like to say that many of the policies that we are making are based either on assumption or gut feeling, but they are not fully, and I should say, evidence-based material, which provides the undertone or underpinning of these policies. And you will find that the policy made by the Ministry of Environment are different than the policies which are pursued by the Ministry of Water Resources. There is a parallel commonality, but then there are bifurcations also which are very apparent, and thus there is a clash. To give you one example, water is not treated as a unison. Groundwater is separate, surface water is separate, and the river water is separate, and therefore there is a great problem. Now, once we decide to have that we are suffering from aquifer depletion, at the same time, we are trying to really deplete the very source by which the aquifers are recharged, such as small wetlands. They are not in the vision. I think that in the water policy, as well as in any practice, these things are not there. There are people from the Forest Service who have got a special hang for the environmental issues, but you know that their primary commitment again remains a forest, and therefore the other issues suffer very greatly. I give you one very current example. In the latest forest report, it has been said that the forest has about 10,000 plus wetlands, but there is hardly any word as to what was their status 10 years ago, 2 years ago, and what is their status now, whether they are improving or decreasing, or whatever their water quality and so on. So I think that treating the wetland as a land resource is in itself something on which we have to worry about. In their training itself, wetland receives very little attention. We have seen their training material and very little. And also we must understand that it is the wetland which support the diversity of the wildlife as well as the wild animal, which are very important repository of the forest. So you see the relationship. I will also give you one example. Minus these animals and minus these birds, the forest regeneration and continuity, and I should say sustainability, is in doubt, because the pollinators will go, then the forest cannot continue to survive the way we wish to make them survive. So I think these kind of interrelationship are there, which I think. One more thing I would like to say, that environment not decided by the district boundaries. Environment is a much larger thing, and therefore to take a regional view where the states can be pulled together, and I think a kind of policy can be created, and the trained people will help creating that policy which are regionally homogeneous and take advantage. We have already seen that the burning of the rice, the straw, etc., creates a problem which is across the states, and therefore there is a problem. I'm not saying that they will vanish all overnight, but I think there is going to be a training institution where continuously their knowledge is going to be updated, and so on and so forth. What has not happened in the past does not mean that in future will not really work. And it is not necessary that we should follow only IAS and IPS way and model, but I think we can further improve upon it in face of our new requirement and emergent requirements. So this is my humble submission, that this should be considered, examined very carefully, rather than summarily shelved as a proposal. It has a merit, and I think it deserves to be examined very carefully, and to really see that how we can manipulate the IAS model or IPS model to provide a hybrid model or a new model to be effective, where the issues really are trans-state and are far more complex. You see, if sustainability is to be achieved, the environment has to be secured first. And if the environment has assumed such a basic and such a fundamental importance, then I think sustainable economic growth and the welfare of the people can only be ensured.
Absolutely, absolutely. Such lovely points put forth by both gentlemen, very contrasting views coming from two different schools of thoughts, but so succinctly put through, and so brilliantly made arguments by both the gentlemen. Such a delight to be sitting here at this seat and listening to the both of you. Time now to get quick closing comments from both my panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Mr. Saxena.
Well, in fact, I entirely agree that there are different kind of issues. We can call them green issues, blue issues, and brown issues. Green dealing with forest, brown dealing with the pollution, blue dealing with water. Now, as regards the Indian Forest Service, they are dealing with forests, although there have been criticism that, in tribal districts, tribals have not been given full rights, or even, plantations are not leading to protection of environment or biodiversity. So there are many issues with the Forest Service. But the problem is that the Indian Environment Service, if it is a central service, then the states do not listen to it, to them. If it is an All India service, then at the state level, they will find that they have no control over these departments which are controlling the brown issues and the blue issues. And therefore, I want this subject to be given greater importance, more budget, but it has to be in the form of a very, very powerful authority which has domain knowledge, which has experts, which has political support, and which can put pressure on these departments, and which will generate reports, which will put those reports on the website. People should know where we are failing. Only then we will be able to do justice to environmental issues.
Absolutely. And Professor Vashni, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I think that what I have said, I will not like to repeat, but only suffice to say that as our resource shrink, greater and greater expertise is required to manage them, to meet the growing demand and aspiration of the people. And I think environment is the only way which provides you the resources for sustenance, as well as for economic growth. Whether you have an industry or whether you have a social amenity, I think for all that you require an environment which is an assured environment, which is sustainable environment. And thus, I need not say that it spells out in itself the need to provide environment first, and then to reorganize ourselves, to meet this challenge, which is rapidly deteriorating and hence really undercutting our future as well as our welfare, both in terms of health as well as economic wealth.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us.